The Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 educators in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with standards set by the Tennessee Department of Education. For more professional development videos, check out our website at cem.mtsu.edu.
So for this activity, we're going to be learning about the founding of Oak Ridge as a secret city during World War II. And this is a lesson plan that is on our website, and we'll show you that in the resources section, which we're going to do after this activity. And this was created by one of our graduate students, Colby Lane Hogan, who is now writing her dissertation on the topic of Oak Ridge and the communities in East Tennessee that it displaced when it was put in. So this is something that is near and dear to her heart, and she pulled together a lot of good resources for this lesson plan. Some of them are from the Library of Congress, of course, and some of them are from the National Archives Atlanta branch, which has a really good website with different exhibits on it where you can get really cool primary sources that are all ready to print out. So you're going to read some of those today. So it's a mix of those. And I'm not going to do the entire lesson plan here because it takes a lot longer than the time period that we have. So I'm just going to take you through a few segments of it and what you can do with students. So first, we'll start out talking about Oak Ridge and kind of what you already know about what this is and how it started. So anyone want to start offering information?
Oh, about Oak Ridge?
Yeah, what is Oak Ridge?
Well, it's where the nuclear bomb was developed.
Okay,
Correct.
so the Oak Ridge was part of the nuclear program during the war.
Where I lived from '84 to 2005, and they're still there. They were all engineers. I mean,
Okay, so it was a city that was peopled by a lot of engineers.
and there's a lot of companies now that work for the DOE, you know, the private. But
Yeah,
what
Lockheed
it
Martin
is
and that kind
now.
of thing. Mhm.
They were very secretive about the building. Ed Rescott was the only photographer allowed to take
Yeah.
pictures during this time it was being built.
And in fact, there's a really cool extension on this lesson plan looking at that photographer and his photographs, but those are not available through the Library of Congress. They're available through a special Flickr page. So we're not going to get to that part today, but it is in the lesson plan if you guys want to go through that. Anything else? Where is Oak Ridge? Do you guys know what county it's in?
Anderson.
Anderson County. Yeah.
Northwest of
Yeah, my aunt and uncle live in Oak Ridge, and we used to visit them all the time when I was growing up. And so I always associated, you know, that part of Tennessee with a fairly industrialized, you know, thriving town, Oak Ridge. And in my mind, that's just kind of how it started. I mean, I knew that he worked at the plant. I knew that he wasn't allowed to tell us what exactly he did there. But I didn't know about the history of it. I just went to the Museum of Atomic Science and Energy, which was really awesome. There wasn't a history exhibit there yet. Now there is, and there's a ton of really great stuff there. But I had no idea what used to be there before Oak Ridge. And so we're going to take a look at that. Yes, it was part of the Manhattan Project, and it was very hastily constructed in the 1940s. And there's a link on the website to the very good article about Oak Ridge in the Tennessee Encyclopedia of History and Culture, which is an online resource that we use quite a lot. It's good for like background information. And it's the kind of thing that you could assign your high school students to read, or you yourself could just read it, you know, beforehand to kind of brush up on your background knowledge. That's what I did yesterday. So, okay. And this is, yeah, all the primary sources that are used in this are kind of included in a PDF to make them easier to print out. Okay, not my phone. All right. Now, it does start out with another oral history interview from the Veterans History Project from the Library of Congress. We're not going to start off with Mr. Boggield. If we have time, we're going to get to him at the end of it. But he has a really nice interview, and he just really pleasant way of speaking, and so we may get to listen to him a bit more. Okay, so I'm not so sure how well you can see this, and I know you can't really see details or read words on this map. Now, if you're on the Library of Congress website and you zoom in, of course, you can get all the details you'd ever want. But just from kind of knowing around where it is, what would you say are the topographical details around it? So, what is
It's got a mountain range too. It's
Yeah.
up against a mountain range.
So you have all these different mountain ranges, and they're kind of in these long parallel ridges. So you have these valleys, and there's a lot of ways to hide things, right? Because it's not like they had drones all over the place. Okay, now this is an agricultural map, obviously, looking at topography, and you can actually read the key and see what all these different colors mean. But why would it be important to have kind of this topography for building a city like this?
Need to be kept secret. They wanted a rural area. It was close enough to Knoxville, so you could use Knoxville train for transportation. They needed cheap land, and that there was I think Oak Ridge had a population of 5,000 when the Manhattan Project started, and at the end, by 1945, I think it was 80,000.
Yeah, something pretty ridiculous like that. All right, let's take a look at another map. Now, this is a map from the library's Office of War Information Collection, which is part of the whole FSA OWI collection of Great Depression and World War II photographs on the Library of Congress, which is quite extensive and fantastic. So this is looking at river transport. And again, it's kind of hard to see the boundaries, but you can see the top of the river transport arrows on the right-hand side ends at that dot, which is Knoxville. And so not only do you have the importance of these mountain ranges, but you have this connection to an extremely important river transportation system. And what do you think all of those, do you see those white lines kind of bisecting that river? What do you think those might be? I know you can't read it.
Dams?
Dams, yes. TVA dams. TVA dams. So they picked a location that was very close to a TVA dam. Now, why would that be important?
Cheap electricity and a lot of electricity.
Hydroelectric power, yes, absolutely. You definitely need a lot of power for what they were about to build. Here's another map I want to show you. Yeah, there's another map after this, by the way. These are just really awesome maps that you can use. This one's a little bit harder to kind of figure out what's going on. But it's another look at the kind of the national defense aspects of the Tennessee Valley. So here we have Knoxville here. So Oak Ridge being over there. You have Norris Dam up here. And then you have dams and riverways in relation to the war effort. So this is all, excuse me, another way to illustrate some of those important considerations of, it wasn't just Oak Ridge that was built. It was all these other industries that were built along this corridor because it was primed to do so from TVA. Okay, so the other map comes later. So going back to what this gentleman said about the rural areas. So again, why would the government choose a site that was rural? Now we know that they were looking for a site that could be kind of concealed by mountain ranges and that was close to river transportation and hydroelectric dams. Those are all very important considerations. But why, so close to Knoxville for kind of train transport, but why else would you want to be in a rural area close to Knoxville?
You're going to need a workforce.
Okay, so you want not just any workforce, you want an educated workforce in the field of engineering and other kinds of what today we would call STEM fields.
Did the TVA help them decide on that location then? Because they have an office.
You're going to read a letter about that.
Could they pull from University of Tennessee then, because of Knoxville? And the engineering or?
No, they pulled from all over the place. All over, even other countries. They wanted the best scientists. But yeah, there's a lot of, you have your top-notch scientists, but there's a lot of other kind of skilled STEM-related labor that was needed and that, education and training was needed for, and that was kind of from Knoxville too. So, but why, just think about the rural areas that they ended up purchasing. What happens to those areas?
They disappear. They absorbed them. Was it 5? There was 5 communities in Oak Ridge that absorbed. I know one example. There's a cemetery that's on Oak Ridge complex that the family can only visit one time a year. The government lets them visit the gravesite one time a year.
Okay, now, so you get displacement and through eminent domain. Now, this is an area that has already experienced a lot of displacement through eminent domain. Not even, TVA wasn't even the first. So there's been a lot of, like since the Civil War even, this was a very Republican sentiment area. And so when the Confederate Army comes in and occupies under Longstreet for quite a while, they consider that government, a foreign government occupation. And so it's barely been, I don't know, 10 years or so since the TVA dams displaced a lot of people and a lot of cemeteries. They have to dig up the bodies and they have to remove the cemeteries or else they get left at the bottom of the lake, which happens also. But yeah, so there are communities there. There are always communities. You don't have any area that has like nothing. There's always going to be some people living in rural areas. And so they had to find an area that had the least amount of people, partly because they wouldn't have to displace as many people, and partly because it'd be cheaper, because there'd be fewer payouts, right? And it'd be kind of less controversial that way. And so they did pick this area. I'm going to skip ahead so you can kind of see in the close-up of this. This is an erosion map. So, oh man. Could you X that out, please? That always happens. Okay. Okay, so here's Oliver Springs. And so we know that Oak Ridge is kind of down the range from Oliver Springs. That's where it is today. And you could actually, we don't do this on this lesson plan, I don't have a slide for it, but you could compare it to a modern Google map. That's what I always do. But these areas right here, Wheat in particular, Scarborough, and others, but these are the ones that I think are mostly identified within this lesson plan. And if you take the turnpike up to Oak Ridge today, you see by the side of the road an African burial ground from the Wheat community, which was a slave cemetery that was discovered like 10 or so years ago. And they put up a sign and they have a little turnout where you can go. But that was, that's a remnant of the community that was there before. There's also like a Baptist church up on the hill that you pass on the left, that it has a cemetery as well. And if you walk past it, across a field, you get to a monument that's erected to the memory of the people who lived in Wheat and other surrounding communities that were displaced. So there are a few things that you can see if you don't mind tromping around a bit. It's been a few years since I've been to those particular places. So I usually just like blow past on the turnpike. But okay, so we are going to look at a document, and everyone will get their own copies. That is a War Department letter. And this is written to the general manager of TVA. So I will let you all figure out what this is about and kind of kind of questions you have and what kind of questions it answers.
Thank you.
All right, let's work from the outside in, because there's a lot of stuff on these 3 pieces of paper. And by the outside in, I mean, let's look at everything except for the body of the letter first. And then we'll work our way to the actual content of this message. So who is this to?
General Manager of TVA.
All right, Mr. Gordon Clapp, General Manager of TVA. And who is this from?
The Corps of Engineers, isn't it? The chief, yeah.
Thomas M. Robbins.
Yeah. Thomas M. Robbins, the Major General Assistant Chief of Engineers. So what does that tell you about the building of this facility?
Very important. Extremely, we got Major General involved.
Okay, you have the top people writing to the top people, and this is being done by the Army Corps of Engineers, but they're consulting with TVA. And so what are some of the other things that you see on the outsides of the body of this letter? What's the date, for instance?
42.
Yeah, August 12th, 1942. So we've been in the war, I guess I would say, for less than a year. What other things do you see?
It looks like it's CC to several different people. So they're getting
Yes.
access to it.
Right, you've got that CC at the bottom, all these different people. So again, who are those people, and does that make it seem kind of more important, or?
Speaking of importance, it's stamped confidential.
Yeah, it is stamped confidential, which is kind of interesting considering how many people are CC'd on it. So this is a small group of people, but they all need to know this information. So yeah, confidential.
And I think Lilienthal was the head of TVA at that time.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I see that at the first CC.
Ah, yes, good, good, Lilienthal, right. I like to notice this kind of thing, although it doesn't really matter, but you see those 2 holes at the top? That's like that old-time type of paper that meant that they were affixed by that kind of folder that had the 2 prongs on the top. I like to notice that kind of thing. It's a little bit different, but you can kind of see it looks like it may have been stapled in the corner, and it looks like it may have been tri-folded, meaning it could have just like arrived in a regular business envelope. All that stuff matters. Okay, now let's look at the body of the letter. Now this is a pretty long letter, right? Typewritten, of course. And what is the Major General telling the General Manager of TVA? What are the things that he's saying?
Suitability.
The suitability of the site. Has it been, I know, I could have changed it to an hour. I should have, whatever. 10 minutes from now, I'll do that. So, okay, so what's the suitability of the site? How suitable is this site?
I think it hits everything except for 1 or 2 things.
Yeah, the main thing I saw it didn't hit was the year-round ideal
The weather.
The mild climate.
climate, yeah. I can't find where that was now.
You said it was better than other sites, though. So.
Yeah. Better than anything else near, in any kind of vicinity, in the vicinity nearby. Okay, so there was a number of criteria, and so imagine how much research and reconnaissance had to be done looking for suitable locations. This is just before they even broke ground. They had to do all this work to figure it out. And what's the most important consideration here?
Power.
The power. Now, I am no expert on kilowatts and what that means in terms of how much power that produces, but I mean, maybe that's something that you could compare to normal household usage. I mean, the TVA is still giving power to people nowadays, so maybe you can get some like recent data just for a frame of reference, because I didn't do that research before this activity and I have no idea. But I would say it's a lot, right? That's my nice vague answer for you. Okay, and what are some of the other considerations besides the kilowatts, though, and the weather?
The workforce.
Yeah, so here we get corroboration of stuff that we've already kind of knew. We're seeing that how considered they are.
Even those that are doing the more manual labor are, and the trade field, they need 2,000.
Yes, yes, a lot of manpower, just for construction. You know, if not like staying there and working there forever, or for the duration.
2 to 5,000 that's a big gap. I don't know. To me, that seems like we might need 4 to 5,000.
But yeah, 2,000 to 5,000.
2,000 and 5,000 people is a big difference.
Yeah, it does. It is. It is. Anything else seemed a little bit strange here? I'm not saying there's something in particular I have in mind. I'm just, is there anything here that surprises you, or you think is missing?
We talked about the waste. On number 6, it says there's no particular waste disposal problem that cannot be solved by normal methods. What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, and normal for whom? I guess normal for the Army Corps of Engineers, who's used to handling large quantities of waste, but this is like a graphite reactor. I mean, this is like nuclear waste. So it's interesting that that seems to be actually shunted for a future consideration almost.
Into the hills of Coalfield.
Exactly. Yeah, I used to make fun of my cousin. No, I didn't used to. Other people would make fun of my cousins that they glowed in the dark at night, but people still say that about Oak Ridge.
Do we really know what they did with that stuff?
I don't know.
That's a rhetorical question. We don't. We don't. We don't.
Lots of secrecy continuing to this day. Okay, so this is a point of view from an administrative level. Now we're going to look at another document, which is also an administrative document, but which perhaps allows us to see a slightly different point of view, or at least start surmising one. All right. You're too quiet about it. I'm so sorry. There you go. Everybody's got one? Okay, good.
That's a lot of land.
All right, let's talk about this one. This is another document from the National Archives of Atlanta. And it makes sense that these official administrative documents would end up at the National Archives, because these are the types of documents that the archives stores. And so this is a civil action. Now, what is a civil action, and would your students have any idea what that is? They would not. I'm not even clear on it myself. What's a civil action?
I think it's when it's just the area that, or they're taking action against somebody locally. I don't think it's anything.
Wouldn't be criminal,
Okay.
it'd be
It's
civil.
not criminal. I tell my kids that, not
Yeah.
criminal.
Okay. All right. So, again, we have holes punched, but that, of course, says in the District Court of the United States for the Eastern District of Tennessee, Northern Division. So, lots and lots of bureaucratic speak here. Basically, if you had to boil this down, what is this saying through all the legalese?
I get your land.
Okay, and who is I and who is your in that sentence?
Brad Wells and his wife is the your. And the United States, what? I mean, the district clerk sent it, but on behalf of the government?
Yeah.
On
Look,
behalf of the United States of America, that's,
look, the plaintiff is the United States of America. And the defendant is 56,200 acres of land.
More or less.
More or less. Situate in Roane and Anderson counties, Tennessee. And Ed C. Browder et al. So this is a notice as to declaration of taking. So this is where we get into eminent domain, which is a phrase I'm sure your students will be more familiar with. And this is a legal document. So what we had before was an administrative document in terms of administrators talking to each other. But this is a legal document that would be filed in district court. And so, as such, the way it says things, the language it uses is a little different. So this is actually harder to read, I would think, for your students than the letter, even though the letter had a lot of technical speak in it. But so you've got all those blanks, so you just basically, you're saying the same thing to however many people on these 56,000 acres of land, and just filling in the blanks, filling in the blanks, filling in the blanks. So when are these people supposed to get out?
Immediately. Capital letters.
Yeah. And what's the date that they're warned?
The 20th to
First day.
Yeah. So look, they've the 20th day of November, 1942.
Maybe.
How
That's the
long
day
is
on the
that?
paper.
What
That
was
doesn't necessarily mean that's the day they're told, though.
right? Well, what's the date on the letter that we just read? August 12th. So this is 3 months. It's only taken 3 months for them to kind of get together this suit. And I have no idea, but that seems kind of quick to me because this is a whole lot of a bureaucratic engine that has to move here.
But just that 10 days, you think a lot of these people on farms with livestock
Yeah.
and usually have like a dozen kids and have them be able to move like in 10 days.
They have 10 days to move.
Do you think they knew ahead of time and that this was the last hold? They had to be out. Some had already moved. I don't know.
Well, they knew it was coming, they knew it was.
I don't
I've got
know.
a feeling they probably didn't.
I don't know.
I mean,
It depends on the grapevine.
did know.
I've got a feeling they probably didn't at that time period. I mean, how
Yeah,
would they?
remember, this was supposed to be a
It was
big
top
secret.
It was really quick going,
Yeah.
and they didn't have Facebook or
Well, just imagine if this is the first that you hear about it. I mean, it would take me 9 days just to mentally get it, and then 1 day to pack.
One of my students, I know this a lot of stuff, but talking about being secret, he's doing his History Day project on Oak Ridge and Manhattan Project. And he was reading a book, I think it's called The Hidden City Behind the Gates or something like that. And there was a section where a 12-year-old girl and her mother were like going door to door selling something, and the government contained her because they just wanted to keep it top secret and they was afraid that she was going to take stuff out and like sell government secrets. And they contained her, I forgot how long they said it contained her, but she was only 12 years old.
Well, and also, notice in here, they don't list any reason. So these people don't even know why.
the Kingston Demolition Range.
Which is very
Kingston Demolition Range.
If the war had started and everyone knew a lot was called upon them to do, they had a list. I think at least a little more of a better attitude or an understanding. And back then, people listened to orders. I mean, they say the baby boomers are still, they'll join clubs and they'll follow the rules, and so it was, I'm sure it was horrible, but I'm thinking the mindset was everyone has to pitch in to defeat the Germans.
Well, another thing that's kind of sad too about this too, the Great Depression, just coming, people lost their farms and stuff anyway. So it'd be kind of sad you make it all the way through the Great Depression and you didn't lose your farms then.
Well, the Great Depression hasn't even really ended at this point. So yeah, we are still in that. And who knows, these people might have been displaced by TVA beforehand,
Do we know if there was any compensation for the land that they were taking?
We don't know from this document, do we?
They were compensated.
And we don't know how much.
But it was kind of like going rate type situation.
Yeah, and I know that there's an exhibit about the eminent domain as regards to the TVA on here, and there's this lovely exchange of letters between this little old lady who doesn't want to leave her house and all the TVA officials who are trying to get her out of her house that I used at a previous workshop. But yeah, it doesn't say in this little exhibit here how much, but yeah, they would have been compensated as a going rate kind of thing, which the federal government gets to determine. Okay, so what we're going to do now, I'm just going to take a little bit of time, and I actually am going to play some minutes of that interview. So we kind of have, we've kind of thought about what this secrecy would have been like for the administrators involved and for the people who are about to be displaced. And now we're going to hear from another person who had no idea what was going on, and he was stationed there. But the lesson plan actually calls for a longer excerpt, an 8-minute long one, where he tells the whole story. This is more like a 4-minute. And again, this is the Veterans History Project. All right, I'm gonna fast forward to 11:32, which is where my little segment starts.
For the rest of us. And he said, okay, you guys pack your bags, you're shipping out tonight. Well, where are we going, Mike? He said, you're going on the train. Oh, well, okay, we figured that. Where's the train going, Mike? He said, it's going on the tracks. Well, where are the tracks going, Mike? He said, to wherever they stop. You're not going to tell us? I'm not going to tell you. Well, pretty soon the 6x6 came along and took us out to the train station. We got on the train and we headed west. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, we pulled into Knoxville, Tennessee. And Sergeant Clark had our orders and his orders to go phone a number there and ask for the officer of the day and get transportation. And when he called, he said, this is Sergeant Clark, I got a detachment, I need some transportation. Well, this is Ensign so-and-so. And he said, well, I want the Army officer of the day. He said, I'm the Army officer of the day. I'll get your transportation, sit tight, click. And Clark came back and said to his fellows, I don't know what we're getting into, but we got an ensign for an Army officer of the day wherever we're going. So after a while, we were waiting for the 6x6s to roll up. And here came a half a dozen station wagons with civilian drivers. And they said, throw your bags in the back, fellas, and pile in, let's go. So we took off through the narrow little twisty roads around Clinton, Tennessee, and into the dark for about an hour. Came up against Clinch River bridge there, and on the other side of the bridge there was lights all over the place and MPs and whatever, and we got over there and the MP said, okay, everybody out, throw your bags out. They went through our bags and patted us down, everything, okay, everybody in. Well, where are we? Shut up and get in. No, off we go into the dark again. And about 5 or 6 miles down the road, we came upon this 6-lane highway that being heavily trafficked by buses and cars and whatever. And these were trailer buses. These weren't ordinary buses. They were semi-trailers made into buses. The bus station had about 30 stalls in there. And we went down this main drag, and there were tents there with roller skating rinks going full blast. By this time, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. Cafeterias going, people all over the street, and where in the world are we? And pretty soon we're down the road a little farther, and it gets dark again, and we pull off around into a barbed wire enclosure. And we recognized that, oh, this looks like Army barracks in here. We must be where we're going to be. So somebody knocked on the door, and a fellow came there in his pajamas and said, find a bunk in that barracks up there. I'll see you in the morning. Goodbye. Slam. Boy, they're not friendly around here. Nobody will tell us anything. Well, we went up to the barracks and opened the door. Neat as a pin. Everything was just polished. We had maid service there all the time we were there. Looked down the row, and the first thing, when you go in an Army barracks, everybody knows, the first thing you see is a row of foot lockers on each side. No foot lockers in this one. This is like the Hotel Hilton. Had wall lockers, doors on them. We remarked about that, and the next day we were given some money and a 50-mile pass and told to keep our noses clean until further orders. And where are we? Well, you're in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Well, where's that? Well, that's where you are. So after a period of a couple of weeks or more, I guess we were finally assigned to work. They had to go through our paperwork clearances. And we were...
Okay. Oh, sorry. I left off the last sentence. Anyway, he goes to work for Kellex Corporation. So they're being assigned to these kind of private contractors when they get there. So, okay. Thank you, Mr. Bogeld. That whole interview is fun. So, what were the actions that were taken in order to ensure secrecy?
They weren't told anything.
Yeah, they knew nothing
Okay, when did they actually find out where they were?
when they got there.
Absolutely. And why do you think that they kept that from these soldiers? I mean, they were going to find out eventually. Why would they keep that from them for that long?
Well, before they got there, if they would have been told, they would have had time to possibly tell somebody else. Because there's not like cell phones or anything like there is now. Once you get there, communication would be a little slower, more difficult to tell other people.
Right, so they didn't even trust like a bunch of disciplined Army soldiers to keep this secret until they absolutely had to tell them. And what did he see when he got there?
Sounded like he was going to a town, which it was. I mean, roller rinks.
Instant town.
And I think they work at all 3 shifts, so some people were off during the night and some were off during the day.
Yeah, it was 4 a.m. and the lights were on and people were out all over the place. This is something that was not a town just a few years before, and now it's a place with a bus station with 30 stalls in it. What do you think those trailer buses were carrying? I don't know. I'm just asking. What do you think?
Probably equipment that they needed to build up. Whatever.
That's my guess too. Like it probably is a lot of specialized equipment and technology bringing in to build. I mean, they ended up building, let's see, K25, Y10, no Y12, and X10, and I think they're all gone now. Right? They're all demolished.
There's a piece.
The piece of one left. That's kind of left for historical purposes, but yeah, it's just like gigantic complexes. So yeah, and nobody in the civilian world knows about this. And so the rest of this lesson plan is real fun because it goes through the photo collection of the one photographer who was allowed in, and there's some before and after photos of like what wheat looked like before in the kind of rural town kind of look, and then what it looked like afterwards, what the farmhouses looked like versus the prefab modern houses that were put in afterwards. So yeah. And you can still do I did a little Google Street View thing to look at the way the houses are, and you can tell this is the neighborhood where the physicists lived. That's where my aunt and uncle were, and I had no idea that here's the working class neighborhood where all the houses look the same, and then they had an African American neighborhood, but the jobs that they gave the black people didn't pay enough for them to afford those houses, so that didn't work out. But yeah, okay, so lots of different things and moving parts in this lesson plan. I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to talk more about the kind of resources that they have about Oak Ridge, and then I'll show you where you can find all this stuff in just a minute.
Yeah, so we have some items in our collection that relate to the history of Oak Ridge from its foundations through the present day. And our summer intern actually built an online exhibit on the history of Oak Ridge since this year's also its 75th anniversary. So Oak Ridge has been doing a lot of events throughout the year to celebrate that and to commemorate that. So back to our website under, we're going to go to exhibits this time, and then to online exhibits. And you will see there is one called Atomic Appalachia, the History of Oak Ridge. And you click view the exhibit, and she built this on WordPress. So it is available to everyone in the public. And then, there we go. Wow, I can't, oh, I forgot, it's like giving us mobile view for some reason, even though we're on a desktop. So it will look a little different on your desktop. Here's all the different tabs, all the different sections of the exhibit. So she used a lot of Albert Gore Sr.'s papers and Bart Gordon's papers, as well as a few of our oral histories that have to do with Oak Ridge to build this narrative. And that's a postcard from our collection, actually. So I'm just going to go through a few of these sections with you. So this is the foundations, and she found this really quick, like 1 minute video.
Right, how all these twins affect your outlook on life.
Every place I look, I see double.
News from Oak Ridge, Tennessee is naturally atomic. This is the immense plant which gave birth to the atomic bomb and brought the world to a new crossroad. These are the first pictures of the inside of the plant, and even now we're not permitted to know what the scientists are doing. What is obvious is that the danger of radioactivity dominates the scene. It isn't only atom bombs that are made here, there are also atomic byproducts for scientific and medical use, and the utmost caution has to be taken. Once upon a time, men of science were preoccupied with the task of transmuting metals into gold. Now, we hope, the modern alchemists are proceeding with the job of using atomic knowledge for the benefit and not the destruction of mankind. While tests go on, research continues, and if the world is learned any wisdom at all, the new source of power will be employed in the arts of peace and not war. Now, Haifa. Illegal immigrant...
So she goes through a little bit of its founding and what happens directly after World War II. A lot of these images she did put, they're not all from us. Most of them aren't from us, but she did give you a good citation there. It's the Department of Energy. And she goes through women workers of Oak Ridge, which is where some of our oral histories come in. I think she also used the Oak Ridge Public Libraries page, which I can link to that in a second. They have a lot of materials digitized, actually. And she gives you some quotes from some of the women that worked there and some of the jobs that they had and how they didn't really know what they were doing. They just knew, like, I push this button every 30 seconds. I have no idea what this results to, but then they later found, and they talk about how they later found out once the bombs were dropped, they're like, oh, that was, we were contributing to that. We had no idea.
Women were excellent workers at Oak Ridge because they didn't tinker. Women were, men like they didn't even know what they were doing. They were just sitting there staring at this machine. Well, men liked, and all their job was just to keep it right there, the needle. Right. Guys wanted to mess around with it. Women wouldn't touch it. Women would just kind of barely, they didn't tinker with it. So, and women could be paid less and didn't complain.
And they were recruited from all over the country. There's a book called The Girls of Atomic City, and it talks about how a lot of women were coming from the Midwest, New York, the South. They were maybe just out of high school, maybe didn't know if they wanted to continue education or start a family, and they saw some sort of ad in a newspaper saying, you know, government jobs available, and they just got on a train and ended up in Oak Ridge, and then had no idea they were part of the Manhattan Project.
Did you say it was called, the book was called Atomic City?
The Girls of Atomic City. Yes. And there are some primary sources in here, so you see this, and it's hard to read, but if you click this highlighted portion, it links out actually to a PDF of it. So it's much more readable and legible there. And then she also touched on African American workers, which I think Dr. Graham mentioned a little bit, of the different jobs that they had and how they were, this is kind of the neighborhoods that they were living in, the houses, if you can even call those houses really.
Somebody told me once you got the level of your house matched the level of your job.
That might be a parallel here, yeah. These were called the hutments or huts. So I guess that answers that question. They weren't really houses. If I remember correctly too, the male workers were separated from female workers as well, even if they were like married. So that adds a different social dynamic for sure. And then, so this exhibit does go all the way to the present. So then we're getting into Cold War policy here. There's another video. Like that first video said, Gore was really a part of wanting to take our knowledge of atomic energy and apply it to medicinal purposes or non-military purposes. So atomic energy for peace, which kind of maybe considering what had just happened in World War II is kind of a juxtaposition. And if we look at these tabs, it goes all the way into what was being done with nuclear waste, health concerns. So if we click on this, from the people who have worked at Oak Ridge, from its foundations, they have unfortunately gotten a lot of illnesses that a lot of their doctors think they traced back to working in these plants and doing these kinds of activities. All different kinds of things, various cancers.
I don't think they took the kind of, I mean, you saw those men moving those little things. They didn't know they should be covering their bodies up and all that.
Yeah, just unfortunate side effects. So then we start to get into some more Bart Gordon material, who was a congressman for about 25 years, representing the 4th District, and some of the stuff that he got involved in terms of nuclear waste and helping people deal with these illnesses. And the big problem today really is the nuclear waste issue. It's something that has never really been solved of where it goes to. And Tennesseans obviously don't want it in their backyard because we know there's illnesses and things that come from that. So, but President Trump has reignited this debate though in the past year or so. There was, in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, people trying to push for Oak Ridge to take not only nuclear waste from throughout our country, but from other countries, shipping it from Germany and other European cities to Tennessee to store it and then dispose of it safely. But it's never really come to fruition because there's been so much pushback from the community. But just last year, President Trump reignited this debate of looking at Tennessee as another possible place to store nuclear waste, as well as places in Nevada and other places that were involved with the Manhattan Project, because they have the resources there, basically. Yeah, so this is one of our online exhibits that touches on World War II stuff and through the present, and I'll just go to Oak Ridge Public Library.
I read a report, I was researching about this a while back, and it was from doctors. They'd done a study, linking the Manhattan Project to cancer rates in East Tennessee. And the one I was reading, basically we have just as high as cancer rates as anybody in the country, or nobody's necessarily higher or whatever. One thing that they noted in the study though was thyroid issues, particularly among women.
Like today?
Today.
And they're linking it to
the Manhattan Project.
Now, are these women that live in Oak Ridge or like surrounding areas?
In East Tennessee. So Coalfield area, Harriman, Oak Ridge, that area. The report that I read was not necessarily cancer, but hyperthyroidism or whatever, particularly among women. So I don't know.
Let's see if this will load. It's actually called, the Center for Oak Ridge Oral History, which I think is sourced through the public library there. And you can, if we just hit let's hit browse all. So there's a bunch of oral histories of people who've worked on Oak Ridge since its founding. And they have all the metadata here. There's men, women, black and white people. So that could be a good source if you wanted to get more into the workers there and hear their actual stories from them themselves.
Well, if you want to like chime in or take over the computer at any moment in the next like 15 minutes, go ahead. Okay. I'm just going to show you where you can find some World War II related resources from us, being Teaching with Primary Sources at MTSU, as well as from the Library of Congress real quick. All right, I'm just going to go to our home site, and I'm not used to the way this looks. There, this is what I'm used to it looking like right here. So, okay. Our website might look different to you if you've come to some of our workshops in the past. That's because we are hosted through the MTSU Library server, and they just switched to a new platform. And so we had to change everything over, and we're still in the process of going through all of our linked PDFs and trying to hyperlink correctly now. So if you are accessing any of our information, any of our resources, and you come upon a bunch of dead links, don't give up. It's because of this website changeover. Just email us and we'll get you the right one. And we're working on this. We're just really, really short of manpower right now. Because we would like to work on workshops instead of just like we're changing hyperlinks all day long. We just don't have time to do that portion right now. So that's my little caveat for you. Okay, but basically this is what our new website looks like. Not quite as pretty, but it's actually organized a little bit better, because on the other one we just put things up in the order in which we created them. Now they're sorted by subject matter, so it's a little bit easier to browse. Although a universal search through the site is not quite as good as it was on the old one, just to warn you. But okay, so first of all, our most recent newsletter, the one for this month, which is always under What's New, you can also go to our newsletters page, is World War II. So if you are already on our emailing list, you will have seen this linked to an email that you must have gotten out pretty recently. Excuse me. And so this is a good place to go. All of our newsletters kind of operate as primary source sets and kind of web guides as well. So even if you're not interested in any of the specific lesson ideas that we have on here, we have tons of links. So all these important links. So here we have a lesson idea on reactions to the Day of Infamy. And this centers around a particular Library of Congress collection where, just like the day after Pearl Harbor was attacked, Alan Lomax, who worked for the Library of Congress, he was the guy who went around the country recording folk songs. He decided to go around the country recording people's reactions. And so he did that. And so he has all these man on the street interviews. So this lesson idea kind of contrasts newspaper coverage with man on the street interviews. And then we have one on the soldier's experience, and this is kind of related to what you did earlier that Ethan created. Again, lots of interviews, which is so important because this generation, as you know, is becoming depleted of people in this country the further we go in time, and so it's just so important to be able to hear their words. So women's impact on the war effort, for all those people who want to look at Rosie the Riveter in the class. And then our featured feature is we're linking to a video that the Center for Educational Media created for us at one of our workshops last year, where Dr. Amy Sayward in the MTSU History Department talks about food and how that was an issue in World War II. And she brought in a whole stack of Spam cans and gave them out during the course of her talk. And I had no idea the origins of Spam and its relation to World War II. And if you don't, then you should watch this video because all the things that the Center for Educational Media films for us, they make available for you to watch through their website. And that way, if you're interested in any of these things to use in your classroom or to just rewatch later, they're there. And then we have 4 additional primary sources on the back page. But let me go back to the important links box, because this is This is a really good place to go. If you just type in World War II on the Library of Congress website, you'll end up with not the most efficient use of your time. If you have a lot of time and you can click on a lot of links, that's great. But we are doing a lot of searching for you to help you make the most of the time that you have to search. So the top and the bottom, I'm going to show you the primary source set. This is where you're going to find all of the primary sources that you looked at today that do not belong to the Gore Center are from this primary source set. So the ones that you did with Kira earlier today, and Ethan created this for us. So there's that bill and that letter, the Holocaust. So all of these different sources. We try to get a lot of different formats, the situation maps, posters, photographs, political cartoons, art, and all that kind of stuff, and citations. So this is chock full, and it's a really good place to kind of pilfer when you're looking for good things to use in your class to engage your students. And then at the very bottom, this is the web guide. The Library of Congress has web guides, which are basically bibliographies online for every one of the major American wars, as well as American presidents and a lot of other topics. It's kind of hard to get to the web guides page just straight out from the Library of Congress homepage. It's not very intuitive. You have to go through researchers and web services and then web guides. So that's why we link to it directly, so you don't have to find it. So these are all the things that the Library of Congress has specifically on World War II. And they do it in an annotated way, which is very, very helpful because you can get an idea at a glance. Okay, this is what I want to use, or this sounds interesting, what is it? Or how can I use this, what does it have? So for instance, it's not just a link to map collections from the year 1500 to the year 2004, which you would have to spend a lot of time searching within, but okay, this is important because it has maps of the Battle of the Bulge. So I just want to look at those. And this is where these kind of resources that they've created help save your time over like flat out searching. And is it going to take a while? Is it going to be slow? You're going to be slow for me. It is. It is going to be very slow for me. Okay. Oh, it's 560 images. These are all those situation maps that I told you about. And for those of you who have not looked at maps through the Library of Congress Zoom viewer, wait a second. What's wrong? Why is it not showing up? There's always something, right? Okay, well it shows up and you can zoom in, and I guess I can't show you that right now. Usually it just needs to be kind of clicked on. All the photographs that Ansel Adams took at Manzanar, a Japanese-American internment camp, they're just, because they're Ansel Adams, they're beautiful photographs, they're stunning, they're very poignant, and there's tons of them. And they're all public domain. All of Ansel Adams' other stuff, not public domain because people are still making money off of it by selling postcards and stuff. But these are all public domain because he was allowed in by the government, obviously, to do this. And then finding aids, music from this time period, what's going on at the home front, all the exhibitions within the Library of Congress that kind of touch on this time period. There's a really cool one about women photojournalists during World War II. So that one I highly recommend. That's something that's highlighted also in our newsletter. So all these people. Good night. And Today in History is a really good resource for students. So if you have students at computer stations and you want them to look at something, Today in History is a great site because it's just very short narratives that are peppered with primary sources and links to other things that just explain what happened on this particular date in history, and then you can learn more. So all those things I would recommend for students, veterans, and then external websites too, so not just stuff at the Library of Congress, and then other resources. So I would recommend going through that when you're doing World War II stuff. All right, and then of course this National Archives thing. All right. Okay. Well, let me just show you where that lesson plan was that I was using. Under lesson plans and activities, you go down to the tab. We did it by curricular areas, obviously. And then we did it by chronological topic. So under World War II, we do have African American involvement in World War II, the Double V campaign, Victory Here and Victory Abroad. This is tied into civil rights movement. There's one by a Memphis teacher about she has her students be newscasters and announce the dropping of the atomic bomb. So that's a whole project thing. And then here we have Mr. Boggild and the one what we did. And here's the PDF that has all of those primary sources in it that go along with that.